In the tropical heat of a Madagascan afternoon, the shade of the trees is a welcome relief. The going is tough through a dense jungle of mango, wild banana and palm, and the expedition makes slow progress, trailing machete-wielding guides. The year is 1860. And these remote forests have never before been seen by Western eyes. And what wonders there are. Plants, trees and animals completely unknown in Africa, just a few hundred kilometers to the west, let alone the rest of the world. Bloated baobabs, delicate orchids, and above all else, lemurs. As the exhausted party rest within the sweltering understory, a family of these curious animals clatters noisily through the canopy overhead, shrieking their alarm at the intruders below. Dense foliage hides the mammals from view, but a rare glimpse shows a long, black and white striped tail swung out for balance. Below, one of the Westerners wipes sweat from his brow as he hastily notes down the sighting. Another novel variety to add to his ever-growing list. By the end of that year, that wonder-struck adventurer had survived the voyage back to England. Presenting his sweat-stained notebook, along with several crates of samples, to the secretary at the Zoological Society, Philip Slater. Slater had made a name for himself in the realms of ornithology, proposing a new way to divide the globe, based on the distributions of birds. But, as with many of his fellow scholars of the Victorian age, his curiosity about the natural world could not be contained. And now he turned his attentions to the mammals of Madagascar. He pored over the specimens returned to him, probing and classifying with intense fervour. And slowly and surely, a seed of an idea grew inside his mind. There was indeed a staggering bounty of lemur species in Madagascar. Ring-tailed lemurs like the one glimpsed through the trees were joined by 29 other distinct types. Such variety for such an isolated island. In comparison, Africa boasted a mere 12 species, and the Indian subcontinent only 3. The implication could not have been clearer in Slater's mind. Madagascar had to be the primordial homeland of these tree-dwelling mammals, from which the Asian and African varieties were derived. But how had they crossed the great oceans between? Slater was once again confident in his conclusion. They must have travelled overland, across a land bridge that had once connected Asia, Madagascar and Africa. Such a bridge must have been gigantic in extent, occupying much of the western Indian Ocean. In fact, it would be more fitting to call it a continent. Slater named this hypothetical lost continent, the supposed connection that allowed lemurs to flow out of their homeland, Lemuria. At this point of the 19th century, the idea of lost continents was not such an outrageous one. As geologists strove to understand the rocks that painted the globe, they imagined ocean basins as sunken, drowned landmasses. Our continents today may have been raised, dripping from the seabed, producing marine fossils in unlikely inland locations. So, Slater's proposition of the sunken continent of Lemuria was a sensible, scientific supposition. But the following decades would see his ideas seized and transported outside the realms of science, and ultimately into the occult. In 1876, a new rejection of the theory of evolution was published by German zoologist Ernst Haeckel. His History of Creation not only rejected Darwin's suggestion that humans had evolved and radiated from Africa, preferring an Asian origin instead, but suggested it was Lemuria that the lost cradle of humanity could be found. For Haeckel, it was here, among the lemurs and the other lower primates, that mankind first emerged, spreading to Asia and Africa before the continents sank. In later translations of Haeckel's work, maps depicting Lemuria in the Indian Ocean were labelled Paradise. In the decades that followed, the idea was transformed yet further. For the Russian medium Helena Blavatsky, whose esoteric religious doctrine, Theosophy, was followed by 45,000 at its peak, including members of high society, Lemuria was the mythical homeland of one of the 7 races of humanity. A group of egg-laying hermaphrodites endowed with 4 arms and 4 eyes, who lived alongside dinosaurs on the lost continent until its fiery destructive end. The concept of Lemuria, from its well-intentioned scientific beginnings to its strange transcendence into the occult, was one that nevertheless persisted well into the 20th century. It wasn't until modern theories of plate tectonics came to the fore that the lost continent was finally sunk. And so, the last 60 years of geological and geophysical study have revealed an altogether more provable history of continental movements through time. Rather than merely rising or sinking, they traverse the globe, joining and splitting, building and shattering. Lemuria may never have existed, but we now glimpse an even more evocative past. There are generations of Earth's long-lost supercontinents waiting to be discovered. This video is sponsored by Magellan TV, the documentary streaming service. Magellan have been great supporters of the channel for a while now. They offer a vast range of programs on a truly comprehensive range of topics, more than 3,000 in total. From the depths of space to the dinosaurs, there's something here for everyone. Head over to History of the Universe to find out how they've inspired our work. And one Magellan doc that we enjoyed recently that pairs nicely with this video on supercontinents is Super Volcanoes, a fascinating exploration of what makes these Earth-shaping titans tick. And you can now take advantage of an exclusive offer, 30% off an annual membership. This gives you an entire year for less than $3.50 a month, even if you've joined Magellan before and lapsed. You can simply click on the link in the description to claim your discounted membership today. Towards the end of 1994, a small spacecraft plunged, whirling, into the scorching clouds of Venus. It was a graceful death, well deserved by a probe that had accomplished so much in its short life. For the last 4 years, the Magellan probe had been swooping past the shrouded planet in great polar loops, passing from north to south just 300 kilometers above the surface, before swinging far out back into space to prepare for another pass. With each transit, as the planet rotated serenely beneath its clouds, Magellan imaged a new swathe of the Venetian surface. But normal cameras would not suffice here. Earth's twisted neighbour is so thoroughly wrapped in cloud and haze that visible light cannot hope to penetrate. Instead, Magellan scanned the alien surface with radar, and in less than 2 years had mapped 98% of the surface in unprecedented detail. But the radar images revealed something strange. Venus seemed to have no continents at all. Despite being so similar to Earth in size and rocky composition, the swaddled planet seemed to have none of our surface diversity. Magellan saw plenty of volcanic features, from shield volcanoes to vast lava fields, but they were all hallmarks of a single basaltic rock. No sedimentary deltas, no metamorphic mountains, no explosive stratovolcanoes. Only dark, fluid lava over the planet's entire surface. Magellan's data was invaluable to scientists trying to understand how Venus became Earth's evil twin. The radar images revealed that the plate tectonics that defined our surface never really played a role on Venus. Without the lateral movement and recycling of the crust, there was nothing driving the creation of new types of rock. Without a tectonically driven rock cycle and being positioned that much closer to the Sun than Earth, Venus's conditions spiraled out of control. Without plate tectonics, the planet was baked alive. Earth was dealt a luckier hand. The beginning of plate tectonics established a feedback cycle that has protected us from Venus's fate for the last 3.5 billion years. Those plate tectonics have also endowed our planet with a startling variety of rock types, and we can trace the first continents of all to those earliest creeping moments. Continental crust is special. It has a distinct and refined composition, like a fine whiskey to the raw grain mash of the oceanic crust. As plates collide, they crumple and thicken, allowing molten rocks to sit for longer in the heart of the crust. Here, they partially crystallize, losing their heavier minerals and becoming progressively lighter and less dense. It is these relatively lightweight granitic rocks that are the foundation of our continents. And they have been gradually accumulating ever since plate tectonics began. Because of their lower density, they float buoyantly on the top of the mantle and are not easily subducted at collisional plate boundaries. Instead, it is the denser, basaltic, oceanic crust that floats lower and is sacrificed at subduction zones. In this way, continents, once formed, stand proud, bubbling like a cork that won't be sunk. They can be destroyed, of course, by the forces of wind, water and ice, but in any clash of tectonic sumo, these bulky behemoths will always emerge victorious. The oldest remaining fragments of continental crust today are some 3.5 billion years old. They have persisted in the face of erosion, collision and rifting. We know their great age from mineral crystals called zircons that are some of the most resilient constituents of continental rocks, and which contain a precise elemental clock in the form of decaying uranium atoms. By precisely measuring the proportions of original uranium and its decay product, lead, geologists can reconstruct the age of the crystal, and therefore the rock that contains it. Even after the original rock is eroded away, the zircons will survive, to be reincorporated into sedimentary rocks and preserve an echo of the mountain that gave them birth. In this way, tens of thousands of zircons have been dated to build a picture of continental crust creation through geological time. More zircons imply more rock formation, but the actual record seems to show a surprising pattern. There are times when zircon production is inexplicably low, when continents merely exist and are barely being added to at all. How does this fit with a global picture of plate tectonics? To understand that, we must take a step back from individual crystals and search for other clues in the continental fragments preserved on Earth today. In the 16th century, perhaps no one in the world had looked at Earth's continents quite as closely as Abraham Ortelius. Fascinated by the intricate process and artistry of committing vast swathes of land to a single sheet of paper, he pursued cartography with almost every waking moment. It is little wonder, then, that this influential geographer saw something in the shape of the world that none had given voice to before. The coasts of Europe, Africa, and the Americas seemed to match one another. Ortelius imagined these continents ripped apart, as he described it, by devastating earthquakes and floods. Arguably, he was the first to imagine the concept of continental drift, an idea which wouldn't truly be popularized until the early 20th century by the meteorologist Alfred Wegener. For it would be nearly 400 years before modern scientists could verify that the Dutchman's suppositions were, in fact, correct. Africa, Europe, and the Americas had indeed once been joined, and had been torn apart by the inexorable forces of plate tectonics. Earthquake and flood was just the beginning of the catastrophe that befell these once united continents. As Ortelius contemplated the shapes of shorelines on his 53-page atlas of 1565, he was unknowingly tracing the open wound of a supercontinent, ripped asunder. There are no supercontinents on Earth today. The largest discrete landmass is Eurasia, with an area of around 55 million square kilometers. But even this gigantic continent makes up little more than a third of all the land area on Earth. Various definitions of supercontinents require that all or nearly all of the Earth's continental crust be gathered into a single, immense and unbroken landmass. Alternatively, some scientists accept a more loose definition, that a supercontinent is merely the joining of continents that had previously been separated. Yet still, whichever way we look at it, there are no supercontinents on Earth today. But there are clues buried within the crust that show that this hasn't always been the case. The young crust of ocean basins preserves one of the clearest histories of continental movement through time. Oceanic crust is produced at mid-ocean ridges, like the one in the center of the Atlantic, adding incrementally to the gigantic slabs either side at a pace of 2.5 centimeters per year. That's roughly the same speed as our fingernails grow. The great continents attached to these slabs are shifted by the same amount. So, by reversing this oceanic conveyor, we can travel back through time. And close the Atlantic, reuniting Europe and Africa with the Americas. Other ocean basins aren't always so easy to interpret, but geologists turn to the fossil compasses frozen in these rocks to reconstruct the time and direction of movement. As our magnetic field has periodically flip-flopped, swapping north and south magnetic poles every few million years, the reversals are recorded in the new crust that forms. Stripes of magnetic anomalies are etched invisibly into the crust, like data on an old videotape. Once again, we can play that tape and watch the continents dance. But ocean basins can only help us so far. Unlike continental crust, oceanic slabs are easily sacrificed to the mantle when two plates clash. And the constant production in one place on the globe inevitably means constant destruction elsewhere. The oldest ocean crust that survives today is just 340 million years old, in the Mediterranean Sea. That means there is